ChessDiagnostic.
Hello everybody and welcome to ChessDiagnostic. We're going to look at an endgame that was played between Magnus Carlsen and Aronian in 2007. So obviously I'm trying to get back into my endgame course, and it's very interesting to think about practical endgame positions versus theoretical ones. Now of course there's relatively small number of positions. We're going through about 120 endgame positions, and it's interesting how the practical endgame positions that we're going to see here in a real game do differ from theoretical ones, but of course the theoretical ones are important to know because that's where you're trying to end up in the endgame of the endgame. So let's look at this game here. This is really a genius level endgame played by Carlsen against Aronian, and it really shows the ideas of activity. Piece activity are really the most important thing in the middle game and end game, and really throughout the whole game. And if you know that, then you can understand this entire end game. Whereas if you don't know that, you think, well, why did Aronian lose? But it's relatively clear, so let's get into it. So Aronian is black here, and it looks like he's attacking this c-pawn, and he's going to get a very dangerous protected pass pawn, and there's really nothing white can do about it. So Carlsen, understanding this, he decides on his own plan of increasing his activity and attacking the black king at the same time. So let's see what happens. So after the knight comes forward to e5, obviously the strongest square, the most forward, and also puts pressure on f7, g6, which will come into effect later. So after trading the rooks here, now Carlsen could have tried to play passively and tried to, maintain some defensive structure to hang on to the c3 pawn, but really that's a losing strategy in the end because it restricts white's own activity at the expense of a pawn, which is really a bad idea strategically. And the reason I'm talking about this before I get into these theoretical positions is because this is the most important thing. Like learning a theoretical position, knowing the knowledge of that specific endgame is important, but it's less important than what we're talking about here. All right, so we're just watching what Carlsen does. Now he's activating his king. Well, obviously it's a check, but he's going to be activating his king as forward as possible. And now, obviously, Aronian's attacking that pawn, and Carlsen's going to lose it. So what does he do? Let's see. Check, chasing the king back. Now, he basically has an idea after f4 of breaking apart black's pawn structure and attacking the king on the 7th rank. So it's interesting how a 2700, almost 2800 player at the time was tricked by capturing material, but Carlsen has a much deeper idea of using all of his pieces and pawns, including the king, to attack the king and basically win material in the end. So let's see how he translates this activity to an attack and eventually a win. So he plays h5, which basically deflects the pawn away from the f5 square, and after the rook comes in, there's really nothing that Aronian can do to prevent this attack from happening. All right, so it's interesting to note that Aronian has won a pawn, but he's much less active. The king essentially has no squares at this point. The bishop is worthless. It's just a glorified pawn in this chain, and it'll be deflected from the f7 protection. So after the rook moves out, obviously he wants to move this pawn and also give potential protection to his back rank on the 7th or 8th rank, because he knows he's going to be attacked. So after the forcing reply, and then rook, the king goes back to the 8th rank, check. And there's quite a few mate threats. For example, if the king goes here, it's instant mate. And the bishop is protecting this this g6 square, but also there's mate threats even coming in later on these squares. All right, so let's see what happens. So obviously the king goes to f8, and then we see the idea of basically just trying to promote this pawn and then check. So the black rook is forced to come back to protect, And if black gets any ideas of pushing this pawn, then it's basically too slow. All right, so now the king is starting to come in, either just attacking these pawns or also attacking the bishop and supporting the promotion of the pawn. Now, obviously, Aronian wants to protect his back rank and also do what he can to prevent checkmate, but it's too slow. So after the king comes forward, basically protecting his pawn, and now he starts his idea of promotion, but it's too slow and this game's already lost. So let's see what happens. After check, check, and then check once more, the game's over. Why is the game over? Well, if rook takes, and now he can easily stop this pawn. The king's trapped on the 8th rank, and this pawn will promote soon enough. So it looked very simple. What exactly did Aronian do wrong? Well, he basically misunderstood activity in the endgame, and he allowed Carlsen to, at the expense of material, get more activity and a very strong attack. And this knight is much stronger than the bishop in this position. All right, so these general ideas, I just wanted to talk about that today. I'm going to be resuming my endgame series, but I will be interspersing this endgame series with basically practical endgame positions. You know, not go over every single line in every position or start, later in the endgame, but just to illustrate a point. And also let me know how this microphone's working. I wasn't happy with the sound quality in the last video, so I'm going to try to improve that as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.